Hello, I'm Colin Harkness, here again to tell you a little bit more about my passion, one of my passions I should say, and that is for Spanish wine. Now it's Easter Sunday in fact, and start of spring. Here in Spain we've got some beautiful weather, and in the background you may be able to hear a little bit of bird song as well. It's very pretty, also quite relevant to the wine that I've chosen today in a way. You can see it in front of me, it's called Taús. I'll tell you a little bit more about why it's got its name, but I'll tell you first of all that it comes from Bodegas Hacienda del Carche, and this is from DO, Denominación de Origen, Jumilla. We're talking about wine in the southeast of Spain, the hot, the arid sometimes area of Spain, where we get lots and lots of tourists on the coast, and we get furnace-like heat in the interior during the summer, but at winter it can go down to below freezing. So vines that grow in this area have got to be able to adapt. Now, this particular bodega has actually chosen what I think is a very sensible route. It's decided to use indigenous grape varieties, but also grape varieties which have proven themselves throughout the world to be able to adapt to different conditions. Conditions different to those from their original country, which in this case is France. Because this particular bodega uses, for example, for red wines, it uses the indigenous Monastrell, also known as Mourvèdre, but originally a Spanish grape, as you've probably heard before on these videos I'm doing. But also, there's the addition of, for example, a Cabernet Sauvignon, traditionally considered to be a French grape variety, and also Syrah. Now, Syrah, very interesting for me, because, of course, Syrah makes some of the great wines, the great red wines that you can find in the Rhone Valley, for example, in France. And sometimes tasters like myself would talk about certain spicy, certain peppery notes with French Syrah. With Spanish Syrah, you get that, but a little bit less so. And the reason for that, I think, is because here we are guaranteed, particularly in the southeast of Spain, we are guaranteed that the grapes are going to ripen perfectly because there's so much sunshine. It's not the case always in France, although climate change I think is probably making a little bit of a difference. So what have we got? We've got a wine here which is made with Monastrell, Syrah and Cabernet Sauvignon. Now, what about the name of the wine? Taús. What about the label? Well, I love this particular bodega because I love everything about it. I love the label design. I love the concept, I'll tell you about that in a second, and of course, most importantly, I love the wine that's inside the bottle. The label design, it's very indicative of the name of the grape, because this is a name of the wine, and this is Taús, which stands for tierra, meaning soil, agua, of course you know that means water, uva, meaning grape, and sol, of course, again, meaning sun. So it's a combination, we could say, of the microclimate of the vineyards from whence this wine comes. And the actual picture, well, you perhaps can't see it too well, but I highly recommend that you get a bottle and have a look at it yourself. In actual fact, the picture on the label depicts all of those elements as well. What have we got? Well, we have a wine here which is called the Taús Selección, and it's 2013. It's made with the three grape varieties I mentioned before, but there's 50% of Monastrell, the indigenous grape variety, and I'm perfectly happy with that. Now, if you're thinking about Cabernet Sauvignon, you would probably think, Cabernet Sauvignon is going to be quite a dark wine. It's not that dark, and that surprised me because it made me think that I thought I might be wrong in as much as there's not much Cabernet Sauvignon in it. But in fact there is sufficient Cabernet Sauvignon. It's 25%, which does add a depth of flavour, but not so much colour. Syrah is the other 25%. And as I mentioned before, the Syrah there, it always has this lovely juicy note with, if you're looking for it, a little bit of spice, a little bit of black pepper. There's also some a little bit of minerality, maybe some herbs on the nose in this wine, but essentially this wine is really all about fruit. I was looking for the glass then, I got the wrong side. It's all about fruit, but there's a little bit of depth, a little bit of complexity. And this is actually coming from the fact that it's had 6 months in oak. 6 months in oak, but they've been a bit careful about this. 90% of that oak is French oak, and this comes from different coopers, different makers of the barrels, and they've liked to actually select a number of different barrels which they feel work best with their particular wine. So obviously a lot of care gone into this as well. The other 10%, well, 5% Hungarian oak, which is interesting because, of course, it's the same variety of oak tree, French, but grown in a different country, so therefore has slightly different aromas, slightly different flavours. And then the 5%, of course, a completely different variety of oak. This is American oak as well, whose pores are fewer but larger than in the French oak and therefore the Hungarian oak as well. They all impart slightly different flavour, slightly different aromas to the finished product. Now, I'm going to do the usual thing here, the swirl and sniff. Just as I said, it's a delight, this wine, because it's fruit first and foremost, but you do get that backup of depth. You do get that backup, as I said, of a little bit of herbs, a little bit of the soil from whence this is one of my favourite words, whence, for some reason today, but from where the actual vines are growing. You can probably hear in the background that it seems that the dogs are chasing the birds away, which is a shame because I thought it would be rather nice to have the birds in the background rather than the dogs. But never mind, let's get back to the wine. The wine is not far off sensational, to be honest. I could actually have shown you a number of wines here because I've tasted several wines from this bodega. But if I did that, I probably would have blocked out the image of me. On the other hand, that's probably a good idea. But I'll definitely be coming to Hacienda del Carche again because it's an area, it's a bodega I should say, in an area which perhaps isn't that well known. Neither of them are that well known. And Jumilla, of course, been making wine for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's not really in the shadows, but when you think about areas of production in Spain, you don't automatically, perhaps, think of Jumilla. I think that this wine, maybe this video, if it gets passed around a lot, will actually start to change that a little bit, because I think it's definitely worthy of it. The wine is lovely, it's got a lovely aroma, it's got a mid-length finish. We're not talking about a huge length finish, but certainly sufficient. And oh, those lovely ripe plum, some cherry notes in there as well, and there's just a hint, only a hint, of rosemary in the background as well. In the mouth, there's a lightness to it. We're not talking heavy wine. We're talking a wine here which has a certain light presence in the mouth, but when you swallow, it has a mid-length finish to it. And it's telling us, therefore, that this is a wine that's going to be absolutely lovely to drink just on its own with some friends, but also it's got the backbone, it's got enough body to actually stand up to some food as well. Obviously, we're talking about meat here, light meats as well as dark meats. Think of pork, think of chicken. It's going to be really lovely like that. And, you know, I can still taste it now. It's got that rich fruitiness. What's that, a minute after I've tasted it? Absolutely lovely. So, perhaps you'd like to try it. I hope so. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back soon. Adios.